So let's move on to our next paper, which is being presented by Star Vanguri and Maggie Werner. Star is at the Nova Southeastern University, and Maggie is from Hobart and William Smith Colleges in New York. Star is also our wonderful secretary. She is a professor in the Department of Communications, Media, and Arts at Nova Southeastern University, where she teaches undergraduate and graduate courses in writing and rhetoric. She is the editor of Rhetorics of Names and Naming and co-editor of Style and the Future of Composition Studies and the Centrality of Style. Maggie Werner is a professor of writing and rhetoric at Hobart and William Smith Colleges, specializing in rhetorical criticism and sexual rhetorics. Her monograph, Stripped, Reading the Erotic Body, was published by Penn State University Press in 2020. And their paper is entitled Portmanteau Names as Ideographs.
Hi, I'm Star Vanguri, and I'm a professor at Nova Southeastern University. And this is Maggie Werner, a professor at Hobart and William Smith Colleges. Thanks for joining us today for our presentation, Portmanteau Names as Ideographs. A portmanteau is a lexical blend that's created when the sounds, spellings, and meanings of two words are combined into one. While the word portmanteau originally referred to a large hinged suitcase or trunk, it was first used to describe blended words by Lewis Carroll in his 1871 Through the Looking Glass. In the passage, Humpty Dumpty is talking to Alice about the words in Jabberwocky when he says, well, slithy means lithe and slimy. Lithe is the same as active. You see, it's like a portmanteau. There are two meanings packed up into one word. The metaphor of the portmanteau is rich with possibilities for rhetoric. As Jean Fonstock tells us, portmanteaus are rhetorically potent because they bring concepts together both visually and phonetically. In doing so, they also carry the associations of their source words through multiple and shifting contexts, making them complex sites of rhetorical inquiry. In theorizing the portmanteau name as a carrier of dual meanings, we found that the concept of the ideograph allows us a way to analyze the rhetoricity of the portmanteau, seeing it as a compact structure that transmits and concretizes moral and political values and commitments.
We demonstrate the rhetorical possibilities engendered by the portmanteau form by examining the blend Megxit, used for a variety of reasons, but most commonly to refer to the stepping back from royal duties by Prince Harry and Meghan, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, in 2020. The term Megxit is a portmanteau that combines the name Meghan with exit, following the form of Grexit and later Brexit. We consider the significance of Megxit's form, its structure as a portmanteau, and function, its use as a media-circulated term for an event, as well as its ideological value, the belief system it conveys. To do so, we draw upon Michael McGee's concept of the ideograph as a one-term sum of an ideological orientation. We suggest that when portmanteaus function as ideographs, as Megxit does, they force conceptual associations between source terms that may not otherwise exist. Most importantly, they present them in a fun and playful and innocuous manner, making the portmanteau an ideal form to disguise hate speech and racist ideology in a media-friendly package. We analyze examples of Megxit that illustrate what HAP identifies as performative of utterances, fragments of discourse that rhetorical critics can locate and map as evidence of the ways that race is materialized. We then conclude with a discussion of how the ideographic portmanteau expands traditional understandings of the ideograph to account for popular neologisms in online discourse.
Linguistic science has offered many studies on the formation of lexical blends in English. We draw upon John Algio's formative article, Blends, a Structural and Systemic View, for our definition of portmanteau, a combination of two or more forms, at least one of which has been shortened in the process of combination. As we theorize the rhetorical aspects of portmanteau names, we keep in mind Algio's assertion that blending is a central feature of language and of forming neologisms. We saw the portmanteau's influence last summer with the phenomenon of Barbenheimer, which was ANS's artistic name of the year. Barbenheimer is a portmanteau of the movie titles Barbie and Oppenheimer, which were two of 2023's biggest films and opened on the same weekend. While the portmanteau came about organically and has a fairly straightforward construction, it's interesting as a name because of how the contrasting ideologies in the films come together in the new word.
As novel words, portmanteaus often pass as innocent, or in Vincent Renner's words, playful. That is, their newness can hide the motivations behind their creation and use because they are not yet laden with established meaning. For this reason, portmanteaus have a particular tendency to be used in online discourse to disseminate hate speech by combining a target entity with derogatory terms. For example, Hillary, which suggests that Hillary Clinton is a killer. For our purposes here, the idea that a portmanteau's form may rhetorically disguise its motivation is a critical one, as it offers insight into how an audience receives portmanteaus and how widely they are circulated and accepted. If names are constructive and reflective of identity and in culture, then the portmanteau offers a way to examine the constraining and enabling effects of power on naming. Cara Di Girolamo clarifies the distinction between the portmanteau word and the portmanteau name. While blends pick out the intersection between the semantic meanings of the two input stems, name blends extend this definition, forcing a semantic overlap even when none is immediately apparent. For example, the blend edutainment relies on the meanings of its source words education and entertainment for its meaning, entertainment with an educational component. On the other hand, the name Netflix combines the words internet and flicks, not only to describe a combination of the two, but also to introduce a third entity, the subscription-based streaming service. The concept of forcing semantic overlap is useful for studying the impact of portmanteau names, as it demonstrates how form can impose a cognitive connection between two concepts via a process known as conceptual blending. Conceptual blending refers to the cognitive process of combining concepts from separate knowledge domains. When two domains are brought together, a third blended space is created, often resulting in new concepts. One way to explain how conceptual blending in a portmanteau works is to investigate the word splinters. Splinters are parts of source words that are used in the formation of new words. One well-known splinter is gate, originating from Watergate and now acting as a metonym for scandal when combined with just about any word. When we examine mental processes from a rhetorical standpoint, we must also attend to ideology. Michael Maggie provides a method for the rhetorical analysis of ideology through examining what he termed ideographs. Ideographs are the building blocks of ideology that arise from within discourse communities, existing in real discourse, functioning clearly and evidently as agents of political consciousness. They are not invented by observers. They come to be as part of the real lives of the people whose motives they articulate. Political discourse is built through a shared understanding of what an ideograph means. Thus, the significance of ideographs is in their concrete history as usages and not in their alleged idea content. For example, the ideograph family values is so widely used and understood in conservative political discourse that it serves a number of related ideological commitments and political goals. While early adopters of ideographic rhetorical analysis focus specifically on conceptual political terms, for example, equality, liberty, rule of law, and family values, critics have since applied Magee's theory to a broader range of words that, when politicized, can become ideographic. Our analysis of the portmanteau Megxit builds upon this work to demonstrate how the particular naming convention of the portmanteau can function as an ideograph.
Ideographs always derive their specific meanings from the social context in which they're used. Megxit forces Meghan and the exit splinter together. Before they're even placed in a use context, the design of Megxit has ensured that they're articulated into a single lexeme and conceptually mapped onto one another. The Megxit lexeme provides Magee's one-term sum of an ideological position, one that problematically defines Meghan as an outsider and blames the couple's exit on her alone. To discuss the portmanteau name Megxit as an ideograph, we look at the elements that come together to make up the portmanteau: Brexit, Meghan Markle, and the extra-linguistic context the two parts share. In 2016, watchers of the British royal family from around the world were intensely curious when news broke that Prince Harry, grandson of Queen Elizabeth II and son of the obsessively scrutinized Diana, Princess of Wales, was dating American actress Meghan Markle. The couple married in 2018, and Meghan became the Duchess of Sussex. Since then, Meghan Markle has increasingly become a symbol for specific political commitments and debates, in particular, those concerning monarchy, race, and gender. One of the ways this is realized is through the portmanteau Megxit, which draws on the portmanteaus Grexit and Brexit.
In 2012, the Greek economy was in crisis. Greece, a member of the European Union, was in enormous debt to the International Monetary Fund. The term Grexit, joining the two words Greek and exit, was initially used in a February 2012 Citigroup report to refer to the possibility of Greece withdrawing from the Eurozone rather than to accept a bailout from the IMF, which included strict austerity measures. Although the Greek government accepted the terms of the bailout over exiting the EU, the term Grexit quickly found its way into the lexicon, inspiring subsequent portmanteau words. Contemporaneously, the UK Conservative Party expressed dissatisfaction with the perceived lack of British independence under the terms of the EU. In 2012, only 3 months after the introduction of Grexit, British influence think tank founder Peter Wilding introduced the term Brexit to refer to the possibility of the United Kingdom's withdrawal from the EU. Subsequently, in June 2012, The Economist published an article titled Britain and the EU, a Brexit looms. But Brexit never stuck. In June 2016, Brexit dominated the headlines when the United Kingdom voted by referendum to withdraw from the European Union. While the discourse surrounding Grexit focused on Greece as the weakest of the EU countries due to its ongoing debt crisis, the UK's departure was promoted as a show of British strength and independence. Despite these important differences, both Grexit and Brexit reveal struggles around the legitimacy of the Eurozone and the EU more broadly. The term Brexit branded the UK's departure from the EU by relying on associations about independence, nationhood, and identity already established by the possibility of a Grexit. Although the political context for each country's withdrawal is complicated, in sum, calls for these exits reflected deep political rifts and anxieties about populism, economic protectionism, racism, and nationalism in Greece, Britain, and the EU. This political and ideological baggage is carried over to the Megxit portmanteau.
Megxit as an ideograph is largely shaped by language about Meghan specifically. Early media depictions of Meghan relied on racist stereotypes, like those in the Daily Mail's exclusive titled, Harry's Girl is Almost Straight Outta Compton, gang scarred home of her mother revealed, so will he be dropping by for tea? As Harry and Meghan's relationship became more serious, the discourse around Meghan shifted with references to her political leanings, dietary preferences, and supposed bullying behavior, providing new, more convenient ways to express dislike for Meghan. Starting in 2018, concurrent with debates over Brexit and the appearance of Megxit as a plea to send Meghan packing, her name was associated with terms like liberal hypocrite, woke, mediocre actress, suitcase girl, and in the wake of the 2021 Oprah interview, liar.
As The Guardian noted in its classification of Megxit as one of the most influential words of 2020, as the Brexit saga ran out of steam, the zit suffix was in dire need of new employment. Although The Guardian's take here is tongue-in-cheek, it illustrates how a splinter can be reappropriated naively. That a word originating from defamatory speech became the media's shorthand for a highly visible event has serious implications for how that event is understood en masse. In 2021, Prince Harry directly called out the term as misogynistic while speaking on a panel about online hate speech. Because the term Megxit was first used in conjunction with a hashtag on Twitter, now X, we began our analysis there. We searched all uses of hashtag Megxit on Twitter. Then we narrowed our analysis to the time frame beginning with the first use of the hashtag to refer to Markle and ending after the Duke and Duchess announced their departure from royal duties in January 2020. Ideological associations between Megxit and Brexit formed rather quickly, as a tweet from May 8, 2019 illustrates. One user tweeted, "Oh my actual lord, there is something called Megxit. It appears to be a mashup of Brexiteers and people who don't think Meghan is good enough, read, white enough for Harry. I absolutely fucking despair of this planet sometimes." When new conceptual domains, Megxit, are created from the blending of existing ones, Brexiteers and people who don't think Meghan is good enough, read, white enough for Harry, we can use portmanteau decomposition to assess the ways the combined word activates existing conceptual domains and creates new ones in the blended space. Because these spaces can be sites of implicit bias, decomposition alone is not sufficient to analyze ideologically rich portmanteau words. The processes of decomposition and analysis in specific use contexts are both necessary. We analyze other examples of Megxit in tabloid headlines to show how the credibility and mass circulation of published sources reinforce and authorize the Megxit portmanteau.
The longer the Duke and Duchess were together, the more serious discourse surrounding Meghan constructed her as a castrating shrew bent on the destruction of the royal family. Meghan was accused of bullying her staff, causing Harry to move left in his politics, and perhaps most infamously, making Kate cry, a reference to the Duchess of Cambridge, whose popularity seems to grow in inverse proportion to Meghan's. Simultaneously, news broke of a rift between the brothers Windsor, which was not only linked to but attributed to Meghan. While the negativity was amping up, however, Megxit also was appearing in more apparently neutral contexts, but still with suggestions that the move was engineered by the wily and trashy Meghan, who neuters Harry.
While the term Megxit has been used by her supporters, and even to describe her son Archie's birth, Megxit as ideograph demonstrates the ways that the playful portmanteau can be used as a subversive type of hate speech. These two images from Twitter accounts that regularly insult Meghan represent this view of her and often a range of other right-wing views. The New York Times tied the political positions together: pro-Brexit, conservative supporters of the royal establishment versus anti-Brexit, liberal supporters of Meghan. The tweet on the left attributes the royal rift to Meghan, giving her all the power. The user writes, it took 449 days for that disturbed woman, mediocre actress, liberal hypocrite, to break up the royal family. Harry, dear boy, I wish you all the best in your newfound freedom. I say 12 months and the Duke is back in London with a nasty divorce. And this is followed by a graphic meme of Queen Elizabeth holding a pair of testicles to emphasize that Meghan has taken his autonomy and manhood. This same vision of Meghan is echoed in the image on the right, in which Meghan, in a tight red dress, walks a love-struck hairy dog on a leash. The collar chokes the drooling Harry, who has just pissed on the monarchy, as he follows Meghan to Canada.
One of the reasons that Megxit is considered to refer exclusively to the Sussex departure is that it wasn't used in headlines until that time. The image on the left is reportedly the first headline that used Megxit in January 2020. The image on the right from the conservative-leaning New York Post recalls the issue of class that circulated when Meghan first came on the scene. Interestingly, here the class references are coded differently, with images not of gangs and crime, but of Pabst, a beer associated with working class people, a rabbit ear TV, cheap furnishings, Meghan's cigarette, and the couple's dirty and disheveled clothing. The tactic of switching from conversations about race to conversations about class is an example of racial gaslighting, which serves to conceal structures of white privilege and white supremacy, thus ensuring they remain firmly in place. Despite vastly different political contexts, the US and UK conservatives share similar views of the Duke and Duchess. Meghan has spoken up in opposition to Brexit, on feminism, environmentalism, and racism. Tweets and headlines about Megxit that are the most demeaning are filled with words that provide direction for how we should read Megxit, targeting Meghan for her politics rather than being a biracial American divorcee actress by clustering the portmanteau Megxit with references like woke, liberal, hypocrite, then allows for denials of racism by the anti-Meghan contingent.
In these next two slides, we've chosen examples from our larger data set to represent the range of uses of hashtag Megxit that show some of these ideological operations. On the left, we have Meghan waving goodbye, hashtag Megxit. First, she slanders the British by saying we are all racist. Then she insists we are all sexist. Next, we are a bunch of nosy bastards who can't be trusted with details of the kid's birth. Finally, she insults our royal family, so I am saying sayonara to the liar. And on the right side, we've got two Megxit uses in responses to other tweets. On the left, a tweet by Dan Hodges says, sorry, I'm not going to pretend Meghan Markle is the new Rosa Parks. And if that makes me racist, I'm a racist. And in reply to that, someone posts, not surprised, how many times have Megxiteers been called racist? Hashtag Megxit, hashtag Hexit, hashtag Arrivederci. And then on the bottom, we've got a tweet that's in support of Meghan and says, let's be honest, there is a racist double standard in how the press treat Meghan Markle. Women of color in public life are subject to bullying, harassment, disrespect, and smears, and all the while are expected to be grateful that they are getting any attention at all. And in response to this, Politics 2.0 tweets, where's the examples of racism? All we've seen is millions of people watching their wedding, welcoming her with open arms until she turned into a neoliberal, woke, PC hypocrite who started preaching to us plebes whilst living the life of a spoiled, entitled elitist. Hashtag Megxit. And finally, we've got a pretty famous picture on the left, and the quote says, and watch me gain a new portmanteau. Conveniently forget this photo of Queen and Prince Philip with her mum Doria and Harry and Meghan herself holding Archie, hashtag Megxit. It was posted on the now defunct Sussex royal website. This is how racist the royal family is. And finally, on the right, we have a tweet by a Black woman who says, while I will not allow Meghan to exploit the struggles of a Black woman, especially with the pregnant and suicidal bait, hashtag Meghan Markle, hashtag stories we tell, hashtag Megxit, hashtag royals. All of these examples explicitly deny race as a factor in hating Meghan, often in the most puerile of ways, such as the royal family cannot be racist because they took a picture with a Black woman and smiled at Archie. Examples of racist language about Meghan have been widely noted. Less attention, however, has been given to the specific discursive strategies that facilitate these denials. This is where portmanteau decomposition is useful. Breaking a portmanteau into its constituent parts allows us to locate traces of ideology in a linguistic form that is usually seen as harmless. Portmanteaus are typically used to describe a straight-up blending of two things. A chaffle is a cheddar waffle, brunch is a combination of breakfast and lunch, or two people's names, such as the now separated Kimye, the reconnected Benifer, or the newly formed Swelsey. They are fun to say and to make, and when they are successful, they become productive of meaning as well. Because of these qualities, the portmanteau is an almost ideal vessel for carrying hate speech. Megxit isn't racist. It's just a name. Thank you.
Thank you. That was great. You uncovered an awful lot in there. I'm sure we're going to have questions. I have one question just off the top of my head as we're going through this. Was it your impression as you were researching this that more of these portmanteaus are used on either side of the political spectrum? Because I can think of some on the right and I can't think of too many on the left. But maybe that's just me.
I think they're I mean, we would, in terms of figuring out which are specifically ideographic, I don't know. But in terms of general just use, they're all over. You know, they're across the political spectrum. But in terms of which ones are doing this kind of work, I don't know.
That splinter, the exit part of it, has proved to be incredibly productive, hasn't it?
It has. One of the real early versions, like when we years ago first started talking about this, was to trace the exit splinter specifically through different portmanteaus. And then it just kind of, you know, it went into a different direction. But yes, it is. And it's productive in a way that's, I can't think of the word, but it continues to, as it's productive, it can generate more productivity.
Yeah. It was very interesting to me that despite it being called Brexit and having the word exit right in it, there are still people in the UK, in Britain, who, when they read about not being included in EU stuff, say, why is this happening? Why aren't we being consulted? And it's like, well, exit. Like, do you not get what the exit part of Brexit meant? I don't know, maybe. So in that way, the word has become sort of opaque. Like it was used politically for reasons, and then the actual meaning of exiting, like what does it mean to leave, was not really apparent to people, and they still haven't quite come to grips with practically what that means.
I would say, Laurel, that the part that you just brought up and that Maggie mentioned was really our focus initially, as Maggie said, and we didn't even expect to see any of the ideological components. So we started as rhetoric scholars saying, I wonder what happens rhetorically when we take these two concepts and we mash them together into one word, and what's sort of carried over and how that affects how it's received by an audience and how it's proliferated online. And it took really digging into it and reading research on portmanteau decomposition and the kind of idea that you have to separate the parts and look at both individually before we got to the whole idea of like, wow, now what happens when there's ideology and when that's laden in the term, and how does that make it proliferate in these ways that are really problematic, because the form itself comes across so playful. So then when we have all of that kind of baggage carried over, so we weren't even looking at race or politics or really any of that explicitly in the beginning. That all came out as a process of our research.
Yeah, I think it really goes to the fact that even though it's a portmanteau, it's a different word, right? And when it becomes a different word, it takes on its own meaning and personality and connotations and denotations. So as soon as you create something that's new and put it out there, you can't rely on people to understand the parts that it was made from, you know, like a child that has two parents. It's a different thing. It seems very similar to that. Just looking, I don't see any questions, so I'm going to continue with the thing that I thought of immediately while you were talking about it. A portmanteau that I've seen around a lot is tradcath. So have you heard this
I
term?
haven't heard that. Like traditional Catholic?
Yes.
Okay.
So it's made up of those two words. Sometimes the C is capitalized and sometimes it's not.
Okay.
But the interesting thing about tradcath to me is that it's usually referring to people who are newly converted to Catholicism, so not people who were raised as Catholics, but they've taken this on for whatever reason. And it in social media, I see that they're often surprised by some of the doctrine of Catholicism. Like when the Pope says something, they get all up in arms about it. It's like, well, why is this guy deciding on behalf of Catholics? It's like, wait a minute, the Catholic part is in the name. If you're a tradcath, that means you're Catholic, right? And the Pope is the head, like he's infallible and all that stuff that comes with it. And again, it's like they haven't really grasped what it means to be Catholic. They have a name, they have this word, the label that they themselves assume, like they call themselves tradcaths, but they don't quite get what the components of that mean.
That's really fascinating. And that one would be so rich because just when I take both of the trad and the cat, I mean, you're gonna go forever with those spinning out, you know, like it would just be so much. But it's fascinating just that just when you pique my interest as soon as you say, and this is a name taken up by newly converted Catholics. So
Yeah.
it's very, that's a really,
Yeah.
really interesting
It's
one.
super interesting. I've seen it around just a lot in the last 12 months or so. And the things that they say really surprised me. I was raised Catholic, and to see them complaining that, you know, the Pope is making decisions just seems wildly insane. And uh, they're not. I don't perceive the people who identify as tradcasts are particularly left or particularly right. So it's not really a political ideology. It seems more like a, I don't even want to say moral, but it's an identity thing somehow for them. I don't quite understand what the identity is that they're getting out of being a tradcath. Anna Tsepkova in the chat says, it's fascinating how sensitive blending is to new issues and challenges, remembering how many creative items came up during COVID. That is true. There are a lot of new stuff happening because of COVID and how all those words got portmanteaued in many ways.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of the, I mean, when we were the larger project leans really heavily on rhetoric as the disciplinary field. But it was really interesting balancing both of those components because there's these rhetorical functions are constantly adapting as these neologisms are just like popping up. And it's so hard because ideographic criticism or analysis typically uses historical use as one of the markers of ideographic productivity, like how it circulates in the world. But what we found is you can't really take neologisms and do the same kind of analysis across time.
Right.
And so that was a sort of thing that we had to work through a little bit.
Yeah, so interesting. Well, it's time for the next paper. Thank you so much. That was terrific. So interesting.